Today I'll show you how to light up the shift pattern in your Volkswagen shifter. I'm doing this on a manual 2016 GTI, but this will also work on a Golf R and possibly some other models. Let's get started. The first step is to take a pick and use it to pry out the shift coin. This might take some effort, and if you're not extremely careful, you could damage the knob. I recommend masking off the glossy part of the shift coin with some tape to prevent scratching the glossy surface. I didn't do this and I ended up with scratches. Work your way around the edges, and with some effort it should pry right out. Next, look inside and you'll see two screws holding the top of the shift knob in place. These are T25 Torx screws, and we'll use a ratchet to unscrew those. Once you're done, the golf ball comes right off. Next, you'll want to open the storage tray in front of the shifter and pull up on the front of the trim holding it in the shift boot. Move the shift boot trim up above the shifter. Grip the sides on the inside of the storage tray and pull it towards you. It should snap right out, but we can't remove it just yet. Above the storage tray, use your fingers to pull off the trim around the climate controls from the bottom. Now you should be able to pull the storage tray right out and move it to the side. Be careful not to pull too hard on the wires for the USB port. Next, you'll need to remove these two T15 Torx screws here. Once they're removed, you'll need to unplug the connector for the drive mode buttons on the left, and also on the right if you have buttons there. You can also disconnect your engine start button, but I left mine in. Slide the trim above the shift boot trim and move it out of the way, being careful not to pull too hard on any wires you left plugged in. We'll need to remove this metal clamp holding the shift knob in. This was a huge pain to do. I used some snips to attempt to cut it off, but there wasn't a lot of room to work with. The trick is to get it loose enough that you can slide the shifter off, and then you'll be able to slide it off the shifter. We'll be replacing this clamp with a new piece, so don't worry about damaging it. Now that we've got everything off, here comes the fun part. We'll drill a hole through the inside of the shift knob. This will allow us to route the wires for the LED. I also drilled a hole through the left side of the plastic. Without this, the wires would get in the way of the shift knob seating properly. Let's put the knob and boot off to the side and grab the coin. If you flip it over, you'll notice that there are 3 tabs holding it in. Very carefully, take a flathead screwdriver and pry each of these loose, just enough to let them clear the openings. These tabs look very fragile, so be extremely careful not to break them. The black coin is stuck inside the red plastic piece with adhesive. You'll need to take a heat gun and heat it up to loosen the adhesive. This will make it easier to pry off. Once it's off, you'll want to peel off the remaining adhesive, since we need access to the bare surface of the back of the coin. Be gentle and don't scratch the back of the coin while doing this. The next step is to do exactly what I just told you not to do, which is to scratch the back of the coin. If you look closely, you can see an outline of the shift pattern that's on the other side. What you want to do is scratch the surface of the back with a pick in the shape of the shift pattern, being careful to make the lines as straight as possible. As you're doing this, look at the front of the shift coin occasionally to make sure it's working. If you shine a flashlight through the back, you can see light coming through. A better alternative to this step would have been to use some kind of laser etching machine to draw the design using some kind of software, but most people won't have access to something like this at home. I added some electrical tape to the back to prevent light from coming through any extra scratches I may have made. When you're done, go ahead and put the coin into the red plastic trim, or if you have a Golf R, it's going to be blue. Shine a flashlight one more time through the back and you'll see that the color matches the color of the plastic ring around the shifter. Next, we can snap the red piece into the outer silver piece and put this assembly off to the side. Now let's focus on the lighting element. I used a white LED and a 680 ohm resistor. Different color LEDs might have different resistance requirements. I soldered one side of the resistor to the shorter lead on the LED. This is the negative lead and commonly called the cathode. Check to make sure it's secure. Next, we'll do the same with a red wire on the anode, which is the positive side, and a longer lead on the LED. On the other end of the resistor, you'll also want to solder a black wire. Both wires should be about a foot long. Remember, it's always better to have the wires be too long than not long enough, as you can cut them down to the correct length later. I started with a short wire for testing purposes, and later went back and added the correct length of wire. Be sure to put heat shrink or electrical tape around the positive end to prevent any shorts. Now let's put that off to the side and let's work on the golf ball part of the shift knob. We need to drill a hole in the top between the two screw holes. This is where the LED will sit. You want the hole to be big enough for the wires and resistor to fit through, but small enough that the LED can sit on top of it. Now we'll do a test fit. Push the wires through the hole gently. If you're having trouble getting them through, consider making the hole slightly bigger until they fit. We'll hook up both wires to a 9-volt battery and the LED should light up. Now that we've soldered all the wires to the LED and resistor, we'll use friction tape to tape the two wires together, being careful to keep the wires straight. This will help prevent the wires from being damaged with any movement of the shifter. You want to have a very thin layer of tape or you might have trouble putting the shift knob back on. You can pick up this tape at any hardware store. I went about halfway down the wires at first with the tape. Later we'll tape it the rest of the way down. Now we can slide the wires into the hole in the top of the shift knob and try to fish it through the hole in the left side of the bottom of the shift knob. When putting the golf ball on the silver part of the shift knob, pay attention and be sure to line it up in the correct direction. Once the golf ball is on, we can put the T25 screws back in and tighten them up. Next we'll take a new hose clamp to replace the one we broke off. These can be bought at any hardware store. Back in the car, we can now slide the shift knob back onto the shaft. Make sure it's facing the correct direction. The wires should be coming out of the left side. Slide it far enough down that the hose clamp lines up with the rough section of the shaft. If you're having trouble, you may need to adjust the wires a bit and pull them a little farther through. Next, take a screwdriver or a ratchet and tighten the hose clamp. We'll need to tap the wires into the existing wiring in the car. We'll use the connector for the drive mode buttons on the left. I've already wired something to the car, so I'll tap into these connections. The red wire from the shift knob should go to the gray wire in the connector, and the black wire on the shift knob should go to the brown wire on the connector. Once it's all wired up, we can turn on the car in accessory mode and test it out. Alright, it works. That's awesome. Now let's put the car back together. Start by sliding the outer shifter trim back over the inner trim and reconnecting all the connectors. Next, put the outer trim back into place. If you haven't already, zip tie the shifter wires to the wire from the connector to prevent it from moving around and possibly getting in the way of the shifter. You'll want to test all the gears, including reverse, and be sure it's able to comfortably move around without putting stress on the wire. When that's done, you can screw the T15 screws back in to hold the outer trim in place. Now you can slide the shift boot down and snap the inner trim into place. First slide the bottom in and then snap the top corners into place. Next, let's put the storage tray back. This one's a bit tricky if you don't do it right. First slide it in, then you'll want to reach your hand inside the tray and push on the back with a slightly upward force until it snaps in. If it doesn't work, try again, but don't force it. Once the storage tray is in, close the tray and put the climate control trim back on. It should snap right into place. Finally, we'll put the shift coin back into the shift knob and push it all the way in so it stays. Let's turn on the headlights and give this a quick test. Man, that looks awesome. Because I didn't glue the shift coin in, I noticed after about a day that it had rotated and would occasionally come off while I was shifting. To fix this, I glued it in place with some super glue. First I used some masking tape to lift it off, and then I applied a very small amount of glue to the side, being careful not to get the glue behind the shift pattern. Finally, press the shift coin into place, being sure the shift pattern is lined up straight, and hold it there for 15 seconds or so. And that's how you make your shift knob light up. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.